Hot stove conversations about baseball, history, football, and current events that may leave you saying there's more to consider. Now, here's your host, Jack Moore.
Welcome to More to Consider. I have my good friend Laura on. We're doing the Mod Squad today. Mine is Charles. Charles will be back soon. We're going to do a little review of the year. Laura, how was your Christmas? How are you?
Well, I'm fantastic, and Christmas was too. Thanks for asking.
Okay, well, that's good. I mean, yeah. I don't want to say Christmas is another day and all that. I love Jesus. It's the birth of Christ and all that. And it's all of that. But and that brings up a little point. That's fair for discussion. I've had this discussion with a number of people when it comes to Christmas. And, we grew up in America. You and I grew up in the United States of America, and we grew up in a time where we probably look forward to the little Charlie Brown Christmas and watching Rudolph every year and all of that. There was something about the whole messaging about Christmas that even as a kid, I'm not trying to say I was little special Jackie, but I do remember this. I do distinctly remember this. I remember being in the first to fourth grade or so, and the kids that I thought were the biggest assholes in the class coming in with, look what I got, look what I got. And I remember kids that were poor kids that were friends that I knew weren't as well off. And they weren't like bringing in the new shoes and the rest. And I used to think, what if a son of a bitch is Santa, right? I mean, why do the poor kids get so little? And it seems like the richer kids that get everything. What's this with Santa? I mean, I remember perceiving that even as a kid, there seemed to be some inequity in how Christmas came out for kids. Did you ever have that sense? Did you ever think about that?
Never occurred to me.
Okay.
I could see how it would if I had those experiences. I think that could be actually traumatizing. When you have this picture of this guy who's supposed to be so good, and yet he's not good to you.
Yeah, and okay, now I was also heavily influenced, and I've gotten in a lot of trouble. So I'm just going to go down that road because this might make for some good talk podcasting. But it always kind of concerned me the way people perceive it. So I'm in a public school years ago when I was finishing my master's degree, and I'm in there subbing. And I was just getting conversations with the students, and I'm like, hey, based upon the depiction of Santa in Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, have you ever seen a bigger son of a bitch? And they're like, Santa's awesome. Santa's sacred. Santa, you don't talk bad about Santa. I'm like, okay, let's take this in, right? It seems to be the number one skill of the reindeer is leaping ability, power in the air, stay in the air, pull the sled, and all that stuff, right? Well, he's going through his tryouts, his young kind of adolescent period time tryouts, and he's the best of all of them. Then his nose gets exposed. And Santa Claus literally says to the father, too bad your kid promising reindeer, too bad little son bitch has a red nose. And, now and the father's been slapping mud on it to try to make people not know that, or in general, the whole Christmas atmosphere up there, that no one knows this. And I remember as a kid, I thought it was one of those kind of fables that it was, little guy gets picked on, becomes the hero in the end. We all know that one, right? But I was thinking there's kind of a deeper thing here, like, why is he getting ostracized? Why is he going through all this when he's the best, right? Now, little Clarice, she's awesome. She hangs in there. She sees this wonderful side of him. And then Herb is in the sweatshop that they're running, and he doesn't want to be a toy maker. And the guy's coming down on him. He wants to be a dentist. And then he kind of gets pushed off the island or gets pushed out. Then you got this island of misfit toys. And man, they're crying their eyes out every year because Santa won't bring he won't bring himself down there to pick up these toys. And he promises every year and never comes through. So I'm thinking about all this. So I'm saying this to these students. I literally get called in by a principal. It's come to my attention you were bad-mouthing Santa, at the school. And we don't do that here and all. And I'm like, why does no one get this? So to kind of fast forward to the end, I understand that I did a little research on this, and I found that the guy who came up with the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer led to the song and everything. It was, I think, late 40s, post-World War II, and these kids, the mother was dying of cancer, so the father wanted the kids to have a better Christmas, so he wrote the story about the super reindeer. In the 64 version, in that claymation, the little moving puppet things that they found, that they actually ended up finding, and they're about, 18 inches tall, but they actually did put them through every motion. That's how they made that Rudolph the Red-Nosed, what was it, Rankin and Bass. Last minute, they go and they get Burl Ives to be the snowman. I mean, okay, so this is a major production. But I understand in 1964, they were trying to make some social justice statements when they did it. So it wasn't, while it was based as a character on the original guy that wrote the Rudolph story, they were trying to kind of 60. And then it all kind of came clear. They're like, the message was, yes, Rudolph, and this is what I said to, and I'll say, this is what I said to the kids. I said, okay, imagine it's 1951, because they're telling me Santa's the nicest guy on earth. I'm like, imagine it's 1951, right? And we're in Alabama. And there's a kid out there on the hard top. He's out there, on the asphalt playing basketball. He's reining him in from 30 feet. And the white coach at the local high school goes and puts his arm around the father and is like, hey, your kid's probably the best basketball player in the state. Too bad he's black. How would y'all take that? And they're like, well, that's different. I'm like, is it? Rudolph was the best reindeer, but he had a red nose. So he couldn't be on the sleigh team because of his red nose. Turns out that's exactly what they were addressing. So Rudolph represented racism. Okay? Herbie actually represented, according to this article I read, he was a homosexual. The fact that he wanted to be a dentist and not work in the sweatshop meant he was different or whatever, and, he was being pushed out. And remember, the boss was calling him names. Herbie doesn't want to be, he doesn't want to be a doll maker or whatever. And
doesn't like to make toys.
Right, he doesn't like to make, doesn't like to make toys. And then the Island of Misfit Toys was to represent the handicapped. So, I'm thinking about that last scene, and I could have envisioned where Santa, and remember, Santa's coming down with all that bad energy, even at the end. He comes down, all right, everybody gather around, I got to cancel Christmas. And Rudolph, for God's sake, would you turn the note? Whoa, wait a minute. On second thought, you have utility. You can pull me out of this bad situation. Rudolph, with your nose so bright, won't you? He should have said, why don't you carry you? He should have probably come back with a nice one-liner and said, pull the sled yourself, you fat bastard. Something like that. But he doesn't. Because he wants to be there for the kids or whatever. But then what does Rudolph end up making happen? What's his first thing out the chute when he says, yeah, I'll pull the sled?
You have to get the toys from the Misfit.
Gotta go get the toys. Yep. Who's the hero?
It's Rudolph.
Who's the bad guy? It's Santa. Santa's awful, right? But I remember as a 6-year-old, I'm watching it as a kid. I swear to you, I'm being honest. I go, I don't really like the way Santa treats people. He's yelling at the wife. The wife's like, Santa, get fat, have some more cookies. Shut up, bitch. Go change the channel on the TV or something. I was like, damn. Who is this guy, right? And this is a guy we're supposed to look up to. So that gets me in trouble. Got me in trouble at the radio station one time, too. One time at Christmas, I started. And our mutual buddy was like, what are you doing? You got everybody in town. The kids are going to be crying and all. And I'm like, I'm just sitting there making an analysis of what I thought was something being depicted in the story. Now, it has surprised me the number of people that do defend Santa and all this. But I'm just saying, if you're kind of an objective human being, whether you're 6 as I was probably when I took all this in, objectively, Santa wasn't a nice guy. Fair?
In that story, yes.
Yes, in that story. Doesn't mean that's all the depictions of Santa Claus. But Santa, Satan, same letters, right? So he's in a red suit. He's a collectivist, right? And who is he to go around with the secret police and determine whether or not you've been naughty?
Agreed.
There's a lot of stuff here that's not such a good image, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, spying on kids, breaking and entering. I think there's a lot of problems. I think Santa needs a makeover, honestly. I do.
Yeah.
Because I think he needs to be the good guy.
Or maybe we don't need Santa.
I think we do need Santa. I think we need Santa because he's the magical creature, and we need a magical creature for when things go wrong, and we need a miracle. I think we need to believe in miracles, and he's not really the miracle bringer anymore. He needs a makeover.
Yeah, I mean, I do believe, the St. Nicholas, and I mean, what is it, some part of Europe, where this original thing comes from. I mean, hell, we could sit there and spend the time to do the research, but I think it was always an idea. Turkey? Oh, really?
He's from Turkey, yes.
No way. Really?
Yes. Yeah, he's from Turkey.
So I've been misled again in my environments of, okay. I am just like curious. Origins of Santa. Let's just kind of see with the history. He originated Now, this is what they're saying. Santa Claus originated from the tradition surrounding St. Nicholas, a 4th century Christian bishop known for his generosity and gift giving. The modern image of Santa involved the 19th century American influenced by Dutch settlers. All right, they're giving this take on it. Santa Claus also was a Greek bishop from Myra in the modern day Turkey. Yeah, known for his generosity and kindness. So that's 4th century. Wow. Okay, the name Santa Claus. So coming out of Turkey, it looks like every country kind of spun a different, maybe, idea along that idea of a Santa Claus or a St. Nicholas, etc. So it was generosity and the like. Here we go with Washington Irving's writings in the poem A Visit from St. Nicholas was published in 1823. This poem helped shape the modern image of Santa as a jolly figure who came and delivered gifts on Christmas Eve. So, cultural influence, Father Christmas, modern depictions, contemporary image. Coca-Cola's had a big run with Santa Claus in the imagery they're talking about here as well. So, I don't know. I guess if I'm honest with myself, and I think a lot of people would feel this, we thought in terms of we were selfish kids, right? I mean, aren't all the driving motivations of your view on Santa Claus? In other words, when I went to the Santa Claus in Miller and Rhodes or Tallheimers in Richmond when I was a kid, I wasn't thinking anymore of, let me put on a pretty good show for this guy so I'll get more gifts or get more toys. Tell me I'm wrong. I mean,
Santa was used as a threat to us, probably starting around Thanksgiving. Santa's not going to bring you any toys if you don't straighten up. But the rest of the year, I didn't really think about it.
Well, if it's a tool of the parenting,
yes,
to try to rein in your behavior, and that's kind of what I'm saying. But I don't remember having warm and fuzzies about him. I mean, honestly, I remember him being more of this kind of secret police type of figure that's got somebody out there running around. Because, yeah, your parents would goose you with the, Santa Claus's elves are everywhere. Oh, my God. Yeah. So when you just took that extra cookie, whatever they're watching. But never was there an image of, there's a kid somewhere without. Why don't you help Santa Claus along helping that child? Santa was all about you reining in your behavior and hopefully getting more toys or gifts.
Yes.
So I don't know about that. I don't know that that was ever like some...
That's why I'm saying I think he needs a makeover. I love the idea of St. Nicholas. I love the goodness. Give the girls the dowry. Save the girls from prostitution. That stuff. But I think what you're talking about, the breaking and entering, the monitoring your behavior, that doesn't feel good at all.
An Americanized version.
Yeah.
Which screwed it all up. Yeah. And so I did see something. I'm getting to the point on YouTube, which I watch too much, of course. I can't say anything negative about YouTube, especially the platforming we do here, or where we are on the platform. But I have been watching a guy recently that just tries to do uplifting things. And I mean, they're tearjerkers. And I think some of them might be researchable to find. So, like, there's a guy 8 years at an IHOP, and there's a couple that comes in, and he notices the husband never finishes his meal anywhere close to his wife because he has to feed her because of some disability she has. So he comes over and goes to the table and he goes, "Sir, please eat your breakfast," and starts to feed her. And then the management just lets him do it. Well, then it hits social media. IHOP does this special thing where they give him this, special bonus. And they are like, "Why did you do it?" And he said, "If I were ever in the position, I would hope somebody would help me." And now so that's what this guy does. It's like it's like spot after spot about these really neat things that people do for people that is happening out there. But then you're always, because of where I'm at now with everything I see, it could all be staged. It could all be, and a lot of it is staged. But where I'm going with this, I watched one the other day, and the kid seemed very matter of fact. And I don't know that you can get an 8-year-old to act this way. I don't know. There's 8-year-old actors. I mean, Ron Howard was 6 when he was playing Opie. He couldn't read, but he could remember his lines, and so they coached him through his lines. So, I mean, it's possible. But again, the mother is videotaping this. Like, how awkward is that, right? So she's somehow videotaping the kid and says, "Kid down the street needs a coat, whatever. or they need money towards, it wasn't a coat. He needed braces, or I don't know what it was. But she asked the kid, "Can you help?" And he's got a stash of cash. Like, he's got cash all over the bed. And he, without blinking, is like, how much we need? How much we need? And he goes in and he goes, "Will this help?" And she goes, "Oh, that's so generous. Wait a minute. I got some 20s over here." And then she's like, "I'm glad I raised my son." And then everyone in the comments is like, "Oh, what a wonderful, kid." And then I'm like, or here's what we're going to do. We're going to do this whole spot. But the overall net effect is, does it make people feel better about humanity by seeing things like this? Yeah. I mean, does it drive anybody to really do? Now, I think the IHOP guy, I think that was real. I do. I think that was real.
I think it does drive people to do nice things, because I don't know if you've seen the monks walking across the country.
Mm-mm.
My God. I think they started out in Texas. It's like 2,000 some miles from Texas to the Washington, D.C. And they're walking. So they're going to get to D.C. sometime, I think, in late February. I saw that yesterday, and I have not stopped thinking about it ever since. I mean, I think about the meaning of it and all this, and it has inspired me to do something. So I think these things do matter.
Sure. But what you're saying is, if they're actually footing it, they're on foot walking. That's
They
a
are
real
on
thing,
foot,
right?
yeah.
I'm just
And one of the
saying
guys looks like he's barefooted, and another
Yeah.
one looks like he's in like flip flops or something. And I'm thinking, how could you walk all that way with nothing on your feet?
Yeah,
You got to see it. It's crazy.
okay. But there are a rash of staged things that people post as if you're supposed to look at that and go, "Oh, that's..." So again, I don't know if the likelihood, I don't know, we're in a different world, that a mother's got, let me get my phone out because I'm going to go ask my kid and put him on the spot, and I'm going to let everybody see. Now, if he doesn't say the right thing, you don't post it. Or, "Okay, son, here's what you're going to do. You're going to act like, yeah, I'll give to any cause. You're going to hand me the money that we're going to go downstairs and eat popcorn and watch a movie, and I'm going to post this to make us all look good." I mean, I think that's a real likelihood that that's probably what's really going on.
I think that happens all the time.
Yeah. And well, some of the AI stuff and all, too, has gotten so ridiculous that, and I see people in the comments now on YouTube saying, "Would you stop it already? I can't believe anything anymore."
Right.
I mean, and it's gotten to that point. Everybody's got a lion living in their living room, or something, they're in Fresno, California, and they found a lion out there walking on the interstate and the freeway, and then they brought him home as a little guy, and now he's this massive lion. He lives in the living room. You're kind of like, I don't think that seems real plausible, but all right. We started podcasting. You'd been podcasting before, but we've been starting to do this more to consider since January. So we're pushing about a year now. Been a year into the process, and another year, which I can't believe, is coming to a close. We're soon into 2026. Another thing I can't believe is, not only are we in the East, we're over halfway through this decade. Well, let me back up.
Quarter way through the century.
Right. But I'm saying halfway through this decade. We're halfway through the 20s.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Right. Because every time you put a new number in front, like when it became 2020, which was the worst year of our lives, of course, but when it became 2020, I was kind of like, damn, we're 20 years into the 21st century. Then, bam, it's 2025. Well, now we're pushing 2030, or it feels like, we're on this thing. Speaking of 2020, since I've been fighting one cold after the other, do you see where a lot of people are posting they think there's a new COVID, there is a new virus out? Have you seen this information?
There has been something going on, and it's been really vile.
Yeah.
Lots of people are really sick.
Yeah, they say a lot of people are getting sick. They're testing it's not the flu. They're testing it's not COVID. So who the hell knows? But I watched a young lady talking about her symptoms, and I've kind of been going through the same thing. And then I kind of get a little bit better, and then I kind of seem like I slide back to it. So, of course, that's in the news, too. It's in the news, but the guy that is a social media poster that I saw discuss this, he kind of made the point. Hasn't been big national news. It hasn't been like a whole lot of things said about it. Is there something running below the surface we're going to get hit with, shutdowns again or something like that? I don't know. I don't know where any of this is going. I mean, it is January almost. It's late December, too, so there is that. It's that time of year. It's the cold and flu season. Nobody gets the flu anymore. It's always something else, it seems like. All right. You're an upbeat person. You tend to, I think, knowing you as long as I have, you try to see the bright side in things. So there's a balance always, I think, between bright side and being aware of what's going on. You're clearly aware, but I think you try to avoid bad news as much as possible, or just you don't live in that space.
I
The
don't.
news, right?
Yeah.
So, and again, you're very much an upbeat person, but what's your overall sense, even if it's kind of at an energy or spiritual level? What's been your sense of 2025?
I'm probably not the best person to ask because I keep my head down. I'm not really into
But
social
you have a sense
stuff.
though. You have a sense.
I don't know.
You feel
I
good
have no
about it, bad
idea,
about
really.
it? Okay.
I don't
Okay.
know. I mean, the big thing that sticks out, the big negative thing that sticks out with me is all of the, what would you call those people? The border crossers who are wreaking havoc. I don't see that much. It started out a little bit that here, but I'm seeing it more in Europe. And I'm surprised at the numbers of them. Or maybe it just looks that way because of all the video that's been taken. I don't know. That's the thing that leaps out to me about 2025.
Yeah, so what really can't believe is in 2020, we go through what we went through with COVID, the George Floyd situation, the protest, country in upheaval in some way, in many ways. Then we lead into January 6, 2021. Trump is being removed from office or has lost this election. And I remember as a kid, I remember 68. I remember the political assassinations, King and Kennedy. I remember the riots at the Democrat National Convention in Chicago. I remember a lot of mess. I mean, I remember, massive fires in cities. And I was 6, so it's kind of like, I guess that's kind of the way the world is. I mean, seriously. And then Vietnam, every night on TV, body bags, being flown in on helicopters. They're dropping body bags off of dead, that are coming on. Or they're landing back at some Air Force base somewhere with all these caskets. So it was Vietnam, it was political violence, it was riots, kind of what I grew up with. Excuse me. So then the 70s are crazy, the gas prices, just the oil embargo in general, the fact that you can't get gas, and when you can, the prices start to go through the roof. The rationing. For people that don't remember this, you couldn't buy gas unless your license plate number ended even or odd. Like on an odd day, you couldn't go. If you had an odd plate, you couldn't get it on an even day. I mean, literally like that. So then there were gas lines miles long, and then they rationed how much you could buy. I was a kid. I wasn't quite yet driving, but I remember it. I mean, it's things we lived through. I remember gas at 29 cents, and I remember, you'd hear older people, I'll tell you one damn thing, if it goes to $1, I ain't driving no more. Boom, it went to $1. And then you're like, whoa. And they're like having to retrofit the pumps to realize $1 on there because it'd always been pennies. And, I mean, everything, that seems crazy when you're going through it to some degree, but you just get through it, right? So you go through these different periods. So from 2020 through 2021, the responses to quote-unquote pandemic and everything we're going on around the world, by the time 2024 came and Trump got shot at, and then the golf course incident and all, I'm thinking maybe they're going to get him before January. I don't know what these forces are or whatever. I think it's possible he's going to win. In this 2015 escalator ride, I'm announcing I'm running for president today, it's 10 years.
Yeah.
And they've gone by like that.
Yeah.
So then when I think that it's just over a year ago, he won re-election. That seemed like 13 minutes ago. I'm not making political statements here. I'm talking about how in 2023 and all of the things, as it seemed like the apparatus was going after him, the likelihood he'd win re-election, that's impossible. Then all of a sudden, and I think in large part, or I think many people say in large part, the being shot at and surviving that had a lot to do with his popularity going up, and then Biden's clearly not capable after the... So I'm really kind of replaying 2024, but now we're in 2025, and I do think a part of me is like, okay, maybe some things will settle down now. I know there's still a battle going on here, but he's in the White House again. Let's see what he can do. So here are some of the top stories according to one of the main networks. And pretty simple off the top. Trump becomes the 47th president of the United States. That's in January of the year. February, Eagles win the Super Bowl. Do what you will with that. Now, March. Here's a photograph that they give. The U.S. government deported nearly 280 migrants to a Salvadoran prison without hearings or trials. This is March, relying in part on a rarely used 18th century wartime law The watchdog report later found that the detainees had been subjected to torture and abuse. So that kind of comes out, and this has clearly been a dividing issue in the United States. And I think to this point, given the last administration, we have no earthly idea what the numbers really are of people that crossed, right? So now there's this question, and it's become a very black and white issue where people are with maybe millions cross the border and we don't know who they are. We don't know if they pose certain dangers to citizens of the United States. But to go after them as racist or xenophobic, all the different buzzwords. Now, on the other hand, there are going to be people that say, hey, got in here illegally, go find who they are, get them out. Then you have that tension of, well, are there people that have been here 10, 15, 30 years and have been operating in a peaceful fashion, maybe even paying taxes or whatever. So there's all these different tensions in how people line up. I guess the greatest tension in it is the race issue, because while we are a country clearly of many citizens of every shade of God's creation and children, it doesn't necessarily mean that people are going to see someone coming from another country anything other than the country they came for or what their background or ethnicity is. Fair?
Yes.
So you brought that up a little bit about in this last year and the tension, what's going on in Europe and other places in the world. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but do you think we've kind of lost the plot that people can't discuss in terms of safety and or unmanageable numbers and the rest? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I think there's a lot of people with a lot of agendas, and they're very good at muddying the water. So yeah, it is impossible to have a conversation about it because it becomes about 10 different other things. And you just can't talk about the one thing. I think Poland has the right idea, and they just don't let anybody in. They're not messing around.
Do you think it's easier, this is an uncomfortable question, but don't you always think it's easier for some countries to handle immigration in certain ways because their population is generally of a particular ethnic group and or religion, race, whatever?
Maybe, but I don't think it has to have anything to do with that. That's what I'm talking about. When it gets convoluted and you're not talking about, if it's just about immigration and it's about the legal immigration, then let it be about that. But because it becomes so many other things, that's how you can be, well, this is racist and this is da, 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 da. And I think that's the problem. And it makes it so that there's no trust.
But I guess what I'm saying is, especially given the United States history as it relates to slavery and race and everything. I mean, there is a history. It is thrown out as a justification for a lot of things to be in criticism of United States officials trying to rein in immigration or illegal immigration or entering without any type of process. Okay, what I'm saying is, I don't know, maybe this is like a really ignorant thing I'm getting ready to say as far as a perception, but when you say Poland takes it a certain way, I kind of think of, I don't know what the numbers are, but I kind of think of, you said who lives in Poland, like probably Polish people, right?
Yes.
So, and the greater example, I'd be like, hey, if you came to me and said, hey, I see over in Japan they're not letting anybody else in, I don't think my mind would go to those racist bastards. You'd be like, they're Japanese, right? And if the Japanese like, you're not coming in because it's Japan and Japan's going to do it their way, I don't think people would leap to as much because it is a country that is more of a particular background and or ethnicity, race, it's just cultural, everything. United States is so mixed in its components that there's always going to be a chorus of people like, well, you're just a racist or you're just a whatever. And you're kind of like, yeah. But now, of course, you've seen the same videos I have. I have seen the people, that are clearly like maybe have ties to have grown up or have family members in Mexico. And you see the microphone put in front of them like, no, do it legally like my family did. I'm not for everybody crossing the Mexican border. So, I mean, you do see that as well. You do see people sometimes that feel like my history of becoming an American was doing it the right way. And if I see somebody doing it the wrong way, just because they may look more like me, doesn't mean I'm in support of that.
Well, that's my history. My mom's a legal immigrant.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. That again, that's your right. So somebody again. This is kind of bumper stickers, really, really shorthand. But I have seen numerous videos where the microphone's put in front of the person who's clearly of Mexican, grew up in with her heritage, her ancestry is Mexican. How do you feel? Like, I don't want somebody crossing the border and doing it wrong because my family did it right. And then you say, okay, does she? So I think the kind of default reaction's been like, well, clearly the people that are of, again, a certain shade of God's children and have a certain origin, they're going to be all for everybody walking across the border. And that's not necessarily true.
No, it's not true.
Right.
I mean, I have compassion for lots of people. I work with lots of refugees. I want to help those people. I think what they've gone through is terrible. I'm here for that. And they came here legally.
Sure.
They were vetted.
But honestly, Laura, I think that's where a lot of people are. But let me give you a different example, a way, way different example off the immigration, just in how things are covered. Okay? I'm watching, in preparation for this, I'm watching a particular alphabet news agency, 3 letters, and they're doing a roundtable about 2025. And something comes up. There's a massive amount, there's a big unload of criticism of Donald Trump and all of the agencies of which the executive branch has some sway, that they are purposely going after his political rivals. And they bring up the Comey thing and Letitia James and some of these things that have been dismissed. And I think they got dismissed on certain legal technical issues with they were null pros. And null proseque means basically you punt, and within a certain amount of time, just to kind of give everybody that legal terminology, I take out a charge against you. Now, I would never do that, but I take out a charge against somebody. And in Virginia, if it's a misdemeanor and the offense date's January 1, and the court or the prosecutor's office finds, I can't find the victim, and we had probable cause for the charge, but we might have to drop it. You can dismiss it without prejudice. So you can go before a judge and say, I have a good faith basis to say, I want to null prosecute, I want to null prosecute charge, which means basically dismiss it. I can bring it back, and you can bring it back until the time that the statute of limitation runs. I believe that's all that these prosecutors did, because there was some mess about who the prosecutors were, whatever, talking Comey and Letitia James. So they don't go through with those. But what was interesting in this roundtable is they're just singing by the same sheet of music, like, well, Trump, he promised that he was going to be this new political figure and not go after the past. And I thought, okay, if we're thinking, and we're totally objective, which I know no one is, would it be fair to say that certain forces bent over backwards to try to, in this, as they call it, lawfare, find any way they could to prosecute, convict this guy, and keep him off the ballot for 2024?
Yes.
And in doing so, and even going back to 2016, and what the Obama administration may have been doing in concert with Hillary Clinton, or to back the things that she was trying to do in that election, do you think we might have had potentially 10 years of corruption relative to what they did to Trump? I'm just saying objectively, could you think that? You
could think that.
So I would listen to those people, and I'm hearing them say, here's the deal, okay? 2016 to 2024, Democrats do whatever the hell they want. Go off and do the craziest things outside the lines, paint outside the lines, do whatever to get Trump. But here's the thing. The moment Trump wins re-election, in spite of that, he needs to pull back and be the nice guy. Could you see someone seeing it that way?
That's how it's supposed to work, or that's how it did work?
Well, what I'm saying is, if I'm Joe Q. Citizen and I have half a brain and I'm watching these people do, they're talking in a tone of, well, clearly Trump now is a complete jerk. Like, he's reneged on his promises to not do the thing they did to him. It's like what they're saying is, we all kind of recognize that these nefarious figures did all these nasty things to try to destroy him politically and the rest. But then he promised for a new day where we don't do that in America anymore. And now he's going against that. I'm like, that doesn't remove the fact that some of the things they were doing were clearly illegal. So is he supposed to let them slide And I think that's generally how it's always been done. I'm not as much trying to make a value judgment on it. I just find it funny that they get on this show and they're talking in terms of Trump like kind of owes it to everyone to be the bigger guy and ignore potential criminal activity which was directed at him because now he's in charge. And now this is highly offensive to be going after former political leaders and all these people because you just don't do that. Well, they did it. I mean, that's exactly what they did, and they did it in an effort. I just find it interesting, however anyone sees that. I find it interesting because they talk with, it's like a level of self-righteous, like, well, clearly he needs to back down and stop attacking poor members of previous administration. Like, you're talking about the ones that lied on him and they were potentially, and in the same show, they're like, okay, midterms coming up 2026, Democrats probably have a real good chance of taking back the House at least, if not the Senate as well. And they're like, yeah, probably look for a couple more rounds of impeachments. So, Andrew Johnson's the first president impeached. And clearly what he's impeached over was overturned by the Supreme Court of the United States, but 20 years later. So for viewers that have never heard the story, there's a lot of tension. Andrew Johnson was, I think it's in dispute, but I believe he was born in North Carolina and grew up in Tennessee, whatever. But he was a Southerner. He somehow slides into the ticket of 1864 running with Lincoln. And then in March of 65, he's sworn in as the vice president. A month later, Lincoln's dead. So now you got this Southerner that many thought would have sympathy towards the Confederacy as the president. And you have really only Republicans in power because the Democrats that made up a big part of the South, they're all gone because of secession. There is a Democrat party. The ones that are called the Copperheads are the ones that are basically like, let them have it already, let the South go. So the Republicans are running everything, and a faction of them are referred to as the Radical Republicans. So they literally pass a law called the Tenure of Office Act because they're afraid whether or not they can rein Andrew Johnson in. And the Tenure of Office Act literally said, you cannot change members of your cabinet without authorization from the Congress. Can you believe that?
Yes.
Okay. So they passed the law, and he goes, screw you, and he does it anyway. And it involved Ulysses S. Grant and Secretary of State and all this. So he makes moves, and then I made this argument back in 98 when Clinton was going through this thing. I was at a round table at Norfolk State, and this guy was like, well, clearly Clinton hasn't done anything that's impeachable. I'm like, that depends on what the House is willing to vote out as articles of impeachment. He's like, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. And I said, okay, if you made up something about the president and you had sufficient votes and wrote articles of impeachment and said he wore the wrong color tie, and you got sufficient votes to vote out the articles and send it to the Senate for a trial, you're telling me they can't do that? Well, that's ridiculous. Well, in this case, they literally, and some other things, they went after Andrew Johnson for violating the Tenure of Office Act. And I would ask you, did he?
Sounds like he did.
Mm-hmm. And by one vote, it's supposed to be Edmund G. Ross, John F. Kennedy in Profiles in Courage talked about Edmund G. Ross of Kansas looked into my political open grave and cast a vote to keep Johnson in office and not remove him because he didn't think it was the right thing. So it did come down to one vote. 20 years later, the Supreme Court gets a hold of that case or gets a hold of that law and overturns it and says the executive branch, the Congress, the legislative branch doesn't have the authority to tell the executive branch who they can fire and hire. They can send them before and have them approved or go through, a nomination process into, what's the word, not approval, what's the word I'm looking for, confirmation. They can do that, but they can't tell them they can't change people. In places where there is confirmation, some it's not. Some it's just hire whoever you want. So they overturn it. So I asked that guy that night at the Norfolk State thing, I said, if they had removed Johnson on an unconstitutional act of Congress, according to the Supreme Court 20 years later, would he have been any less removed? And he's like, well, you're hypothetical. I'm like, no, he was voted on. There was one vote. Had there been the one other vote, he would have been removed. And then the Supreme Court might have come back 20 years later and go, hey, you know what? He got removed on an unconstitutional act, or the Congress. I say all that to say, if they get sufficient numbers again, it's hard to tell what the hell they're going to be willing to do to impeach him again. And it creates a circus show. And after 26, when we get into January 27 and a new Congress is set, he's lame duck anyway. I mean, it is what it is at that point. We'll see what the last 2 years are. But I'm looking to think that that's probably going to happen. That they're going to win, and then there's going to be all kinds of impeachment. All right, so April, Pope Francis died. May, let's see, going through the months here, other big things. Catastrophic floods in Central Texas. I do remember that in July. Killed at least 135 people, including 27 campers at Camp Mystic. August, President Trump dispatched National Guard troops to D.C., a rare domestic deployment of the military that would meet with legal challenges. Still going on now. But according to a lot of people, and I've seen the man on the street interview too, apparently D.C., from everything I hear, and I grew up going up there all the time, is a much safer place.
That's what I hear too.
So thoughts, comments about that?
I would want to live in a place that is safe to walk down the street. I think it's mission accomplished.
Yeah, and you can get into all the legalities of that. I think what the Supreme Court has actually said is, this just came up in one of the other states, I think it was Illinois because it involved Chicago. The Supreme Court said you can't force the governor to deploy the National Guard, but you can send an airborne. And I do remember the Little Rock incident where it was the desegregation of the high schools. Was it 54 or after the Brown decision? Maybe it was 57-ish, but it was Eisenhower. He sent an airborne in. I think it was 82nd. It might have been 101st. But he sent airborne units in to make sure of the safety of people that were now integrating the schools. So that was a use of, so we get into that, this thing about the Posse Comitatus Act following the American Civil War. We've talked about that before on the show. What happened with the end of the American Civil War was they set up 12 districts, basically the 12 states in the South, and it was run by the military. The civil courts were run by the military. All crimes were investigated. All arrests were made by military personnel. So when they ended Reconstruction, the Posse Comitatus Act was then signed into law just after that, after 1877. And it said no longer will United States troops, military troops, be used for like civil purposes like police force. And I don't know. I mean, what they're saying is, though, they can go to these places and like protect federal buildings and things like that. If it's like a federal building within a city and nasty things are going on, you can send federal troops in because they're protecting a federal interest. But whether or not they can go play cop on the street, that's going to be anyone's guess as to that. Is that more of a function of the National Guard? Judge permanently blocks Trump from administration of deploying National Guard troops in Portland. Judge blocks Trump's administration from deploying California National Guard in Los Angeles. Supreme Court says Trump can't deploy National Guard to Chicago as legal challenges moves forward, which basically we're just talking about. Now, come September. Maybe the biggest event of the year. I don't know. What do you think is the biggest event of the year? Is it the Charlie Kirk shooting?
Maybe.
I think so, right? I mean, I'm trying to think of, Pope dying, of course, is big. I mean, these are different things as it relates to certain, it might be a religious group in the country. Certainly the inauguration was a big issue. We started with January. But I don't know that I've seen a much bigger event, especially in the last 12 months, than Charlie Kirk's death. Now, September saw the assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk at a campus event in Utah. His alleged killer has been charged with murder and is yet to enter a plea. Where are you with all of that? Do you think something still doesn't seem right? And what I mean by doesn't seem right, that some guy, 22, decided upon chance, circumstance, or whatever to take a rifle to an event and shoot at a guy and kill him, and then leave cryptic messages, maybe, maybe not, maybe texting crazy about making admissions. Does it all not add up to you, or what do you think, if anything, what do you think about where all this is?
Very little about this. I didn't know who he was until he was dead, and I have purposely kept my nose out of it. But what little that I do know, it does not sound right. None of this adds up. Whatever happened is not what the official story is.
Yeah, and I don't know. I don't know at all. I mean, one thing that has brought up visions for me is possibilities of certain things. Now, when I hear these guys, and I'm not one of those guys. I didn't serve in special forces. I didn't serve in the military at all. I grew up around, Dad was law enforcement. I had some very little connection to actually seeing firearms. But I have heard a lot of guys say that know these things. If it's a 30-06, that damage to him is far greater, you know. And then I think there was the thing that came out, but he had a really strong neck bone, or he was really, you know, well, you know. And it's kind of like, nah, people are like, nah, 30-06 would have just about, it would have done a lot more damage than it did. That being said, the shooting part, now I listened to a guy the other day, Special Forces, and they're asking him, did he think it's possible that this kid, Tyler Robertson, did? He goes, yeah, I think it's possible. He goes, but a guy with a little bit of hunting experience and shooting at watermelons on a range somewhere, that's one thing. Killing the human's an entirely different thing. It just is. And he says, we are special forces types. I have been on the other side of the weapon and fired down range to kill people. And it ain't ever easy. And that's why we're taught how to breathe and how to focus, and how, because we know in combat, when everything's going on, we have to be really good. You take a 22-year-old kid who's never been in combat, didn't have that kind of training. Not saying you can't do it, because you're looking at the distance and going, hey, it's only 200 yards. It's only, if you're looking at the distance and whether or not someone could steady a rifle through down the iron sights or through a scope and hit a target, yeah, it's one thing. But I understand what he's saying. I understand what he's saying about the ability to do that under pressure and know this could be ending your life. You could get fired back on. You don't know these things. Can you pull it off? Now, it always brings me back to Kennedy, though, because that's always been one of the leading arguments against Lee Harvey Oswald, which you know in all the shows you've done with me. I think Oswald did it. The thing is, I don't think they've come clean about who Oswald was and what his connections may have been to the federal government or other entities within the government. Marine, Sugi Air Base, somewhat high level of clearance where they're flying the U-2 plane. All of a sudden he wants to go to the Soviet Union, which is not the kind of things most people do, blah, blah, blah. Then he comes back, Kennedy's dead. But the shooting part of it, I'm not an expert, but that's a starting point for a lot of people on how Kennedy couldn't have died that way. No way anybody could do that, which is always kind of drives me crazy. When they go, there's no, you know as well as I do, there's no way someone could fire from that window and kill Kennedy. I'm like, Kennedy's dead. His brains got blown out. He got shot. Well, that's why it came from some other location, which would indicate a right entry 2 o'clock, which would have blown out the left side of his head. Okay. So I'm like, I hear what you're saying, but if your opening mark is, did you see what happened? Yeah, that's impossible. Okay, the thing that happens is impossible. Yes, it's impossible to do what he did. I'm like, okay. So, but that's always the leading to, therefore it had to be done some other way. And you're getting that same thing. He couldn't do it, then there has to be other shooters, there has to be other coordination. And maybe there is. Maybe there is. I don't know. But anyway. All right. Israel and Hamas reached a October ceasefire agreement. Days later, Hamas released the remaining 20 living Israeli hostages. Of course, that was a big thing in the news. November, any wins in New York, whatever that's going to mean to the future. Well, of course, it is. It is an election season here in Virginia. Democrats swept. And, these are those off-year elections to the major Congress and the president every 4 years. There's a government shutdown. That was another big key thing. In December, in yet another tragic shooting, 2 terrorist gunmen opened fire on a Hanukkah celebration in Sydney, Australia, killing 15 people. All right, so there's some of them. Now, the big thing that's going on now, and I wanted your take on this, because I don't know what's going to end up happening, but I think it's the other big thing to discuss right now. What's going on in Minnesota? Are you following that?
What's going on in Minnesota?
Well, there's been a lot that's come out. Let me try to get it kind of concise. Tim Walz, for one, has definitely come under a lot of fire because apparently a lot of the COVID money that has gone through certain government spending has ended up in places, and now you have this kid that's out on the ground, this kind of ground journalist. He's knocking on the doors of these Somalian-like daycare centers, and there's no one there. He's in the lot the other day, and I think he said, this one's got 1.9 million, bang, 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 nobody's at the place. And they're spelling learning on the door without an N, leering, and they're like, kind of, yeah. And it seems like what may be going on is a whole boondoggle where politicians enrich themselves. But it's kind of like laundering money through a group of people. Bring in a group of people, whether legal or illegal or whatever, but bring in a group of people from another country, run this money through. And of course, I think a lot of the concern too is that they're sending some of these people that are in country now from Somalia money back to terrorist organizations in Somalia. So I don't know. It's kind of like some of this stuff I just don't even think you can, even in a bad script for a movie, you're like, nah, that's too much. You couldn't imagine that happening. Like millions of dollars from taxpayers' money going to sources and things like this happening. It almost
makes me think that it's been going on all along. I mean,
well,
how have they been getting away with this? I don't know who's doing this undercover work, but good on them.
Yeah, now I think he's being threatened quite a bit. All right, I'm just going to read one little short thing here. Minnesota controversy primarily revolves around allegations of fraud in social services programs, particularly involving daycare centers that received substantial funding but appeared inactive or empty. This led to calls for accountability from state officials, including Governor Tim Walz, amid scrutiny of the state's policies and their impact on immigration communities. Recent events in Minnesota have sparked significant controversy, blah, blah, blah. It's up to $4 million in state funding, but appears inactive. Talking about these different learning centers. Daycare fraud allegations. Quality Learning Center was shown in a video with no visible children and a sign misspelling learning. Minnesota officials, including the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, have denied any wrongdoing. Broader implications. The controversy has drawn attention to Minnesota's social services programs. And another thing that's getting thrown out because she's from Minnesota is that Omar, the congresswoman, came to the United States worth about $45,000, and now they're estimating she's anywhere between $6 and $30 million. I mean, that's been splashed all over the place too. And guess what? Oh, now of course we got to say this. When addressing some of this, drum roll, what do you think was one of the responses of Tim Walz in regard to these allegations coming out?
Don't know.
White supremacy. Pretty good, right? Gotta like that, right? I mean, he's come out and he was at some kind of press conference and he's saying, well, clearly the people that are attacking these people and the great work that they've done with these learning centers, whatever, they're clearly white. This is just another attempt at white supremacy, which makes me wonder, are we at the end of the line with this? Are we at the end of the line with, the whole calling wolf, but like, if you're finding that a group of people who did not originate here in the United States are in large numbers within a state, and they seem to be brought in really high numbers with little effort to find out exactly what their legal status would be, are in these centers and they're getting public funding or they're getting government funding, and then a lot of people are getting really rich. Tim goes, oh, you've got a bunch of white supremacy going on here. I don't know. I think Joe Q. Citizen, wait a minute. Explain the other though first. Why you got a building over here that received $1.9 million? There's nobody in it. Just tell me what that's all about.
I hope so.
Well, to ask that question makes you a white supremacist.
Yeah.
And that kind of goes back to what I was saying about this Alphabet News agency sitting around and saying, sure, there are powers that did incredibly nefarious things to try to bring Trump down, but for him to turn around and actually think in terms of prosecution of those illegal or nasty acts makes him the bad guy. I'm trying to think of what else would if you're in a neighborhood, if you're in a neighborhood, I don't know, it almost seemed like if you're in a neighborhood and you've got this one neighbor and you're watching him every night jump the fence and take the other guy's eggs or chickens, and he's stealing chickens from the other guy or whatever, and it goes on and on and on. And then eventually you saw the neighbor that lost all this try to return to his property to get his chickens back. And it was like, what are you doing trespassing? What are you doing taking your own chickens from that guy? You know what I mean? You would kind of be like, if you found that the guy went back to get his own chickens and he got charged with trespassing, you'd be like, well, wait a minute. This doesn't seem all that fair because other neighbor used to go on his property, not only trespass, he stole things from him. He's just trying to get his chickens returned. Sorry, he can't do that. The guy that went and stole the chickens and took his eggs or whatever, that's perfectly okay in our eyes, but the guy going back to return his chickens, that's a no-go because that's trespass and theft. That's a really bad example, but it kind of feels that way sometimes. You saying a person standing up for something you might think is more, not in defense of, but trying to bring about some kind of fairness as to the facts that have been related they get turned with being the bad guy. So anyway, I know that's what it's going to be. All right, what are your not prospects for 2026? What are your thoughts on? Do you think the world is getting better, worse, or indifferent?
You know, there's a saying that says it's always darkest before the dawn.
Yeah.
And I think it's pretty dark, but I think it's because the light is returning. Alan Watts said something about that, and he said it really beautifully. I wish I could remember. But he said something like, don't tell the devil your plans because he's going to try and mess them up. I think that's what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah, and I have that on the street thing I tell you about all the time too. I hold doors for people. I run into nice people every day.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
And so I know there's kind of like those people, like everyday people. And I guess that's why maybe with what's going on in Minnesota and other things ought to make people more and more angry. And this, I'll say kind of as we close on this is why I'm kind of politically, if you want to call it that, the way I am. When I say, libertarian leans, whatever you call it, just stop messing with me. Don't take my money to pay for, that's really what all I mean. I don't want a government program to save the world. I don't want government. I don't want any of that. And I wonder if we're reaching a point where more and more people may come to that conclusion, because what's happened in New York and what's happening throughout the country, they say, is more and more young people saying, the system's broken, you better fix it. And we'll vote for collectivism if we think there's a chance. All I know is I can't get married, have kids, and buy a home. That's what I know. So you better find a way to fix it, or I'll start voting for more radical ways of achieving that. And I do think that maybe has become more. But you're an interesting cat, because I don't really know. If 25 words or less, how would you define yourself politically if you feel comfortable doing so?
Apolitical?
Yeah, so being apolitical, you would probably lean towards, and it is a political view, I guess. I guess by default, it's kind of like God or anything else. You can be agnostic, you can be atheist, you can be, but somewhere you skew into some kind of view. So because I know how self-sufficient you are, you want to be left alone.
Yeah, I do.
You're out there seeking opportunities to help people every day, and I know you do that. So you're like, don't tax me, don't take my money, and then put together things where 1.9 goes to a building where no kids show up. Why don't you let me keep my money and I'll take care of the others, right?
Yes.
So that's kind of a libertarian view. So the view is very narrow, the things. But the problem with libertarians is the Libertarian Party. It's the problem with all libertarians. We, by our very nature, and I'm throwing you in that camp, aren't political. Like, we don't want to have the big rallies and the political conventions. We don't want to do any of that. We just want the government off our back. But then what you kind of find is, unless you're willing to get into the cesspool and make some changes, nothing ever changes. And I think that's the biggest problem. So I think all you can look for is maybe some people that skew more that view, that do get into politics. Your Michael Massey's, not Michael, why did I keep it? Thomas Massey. I always say Michael because I knew a lawyer, a friend of mine, that was Michael. Thomas Massey and Paul. I mean, there's a few of them that have that kind of more libertarian leaning, but it ain't many. And it's not a very popular. It's not popular. Paul. Yeah, I do too. And of course, his dad, Ron Paul, he's turned 90, I guess. He's one of the most beautiful human beings ever, and he only got into politics to try to combat some of the mess. And nobody listens to him. But, all right, dear. 2025 is ending now. And these, of course, are kind of artificial markers that we mark in time. There's nothing in the universe that says it's 2025. It's just, and it's not arbitrary. We start counting at a particular point in world history. But do you kind of year to year look at it as kind of a cleansing, a renewal, a chance to start over? Or you do?
Absolutely. Yeah. I believe in the cycles and rhythms of things. And I think it is time for things to end and new things to be birthed. And if you aren't conscious about what you're birthing, you're going to get the same thing.
So you're big into spring, I'm sure.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that would probably be, of all that's been written, analysis of the seasons and the human condition as it relates to the changing of seasons, I guess spring is the biggie, because that's going from that coldest of worst of elements, the ice, the cold, the sleet, and you're coming into renewal and blossoms and, yeah. That's now I'm a big guy. I'm a big fall guy because you're coming out of the heat and you're getting cooler and the leaves are changing and falling off the trees. I've always been kind of more of a fall guy, and I like it as it gets a little cooler. But I like the spring too. I guess everybody likes those two, spring and fall. Summer can be too hot, winter can be too cold. But so with this upcoming year, are you a big New Year's resolution person?
Not really. I think that people who make resolutions, they last about a week,
Sure. That's right.
So what's the point? I think that for me, it's about living consciously all year long.
Yeah, and I was going to say, you probably don't come to December 31st with a whole lot of, I got to stop this anyway. You're probably
Right.
thinking more in terms of, let me keep up the positives of what's going on. Are you optimistic for this coming year?
I am, simply because I'm optimistic anyway, and I think we have to have hope. Otherwise, it's going to go in a really dark direction. There's nothing in particular that makes me hopeful
Yeah.
other than faith, I suppose.
Yeah, I do. Again, I'm on YouTube a lot looking. I do see a lot, and I see it a lot in young people. A lot in young people. What I think seems like kind of a renewal. There's something going on. There is that 80-year cycle, and it is amazing. American Revolution, 80 years past, or past that 80 years is the American Civil War. 80 years is World War II. I mean, there are three of the bigger conflict events, clearly. There's the founding of the country. There's really that kind of last battle about the formation states, its relationship to slavery, its formation as a country. I mean, got to be settled. And it's settled with 600 and some odd thousand deaths. And then World War II, which historians can argue about the necessity of that, whatever, but we're a pretty big player in it. And now we're 80 years past that. We're exactly like, it just ended this year, was the 80th year anniversary of the ending of the war. And in each of these situations, you see hardened people. People are hardened by this war. They're hardened by this war. And then they tend to rear their children with an eye to make things easier for them. And then eventually you have little brat children that can't get it together. And then you have a mess and somebody has to step up. So I see it as a coach at my age working with younger people. I see a vast difference than 10 years ago. I hear it in their conversations. The kids are kind of over a lot of crap, and they want things to change and become more, I think stable would be almost the best term. They want to stabilize the world and not have everything be so crazy. So, and I think they want to have opportunities for traditional lives, that they can get married, have children, and have homes. I really think that's true. And it's
so
a lot.
basic. I hope they can.
Yeah, and I don't even really think that much about when I was 20. I don't think I really thought about, will I ever be able to afford a home or anything like that. I think it was almost like a given.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Kind
Absolutely.
of, and I think the kind of student debts and things like that, it was kind of a new thing. People taking out loans and stuff like that at that level. I was coming out of college in the middle of the 80s too, so things definitely were looking up from the 70s, definitely. So I think it was an era where things were beginning to, there seemed to be more promising, and I think that carried right on through the 90s. Again, I think the watershed event was 2001 with 9/11, but also with the crash in 2008, that whole economic thing. There's too many things that are spun sideways since that. We see these decades go by because we're of an age where we can see these go by and we kind of know what we thought in the moments. But kids see it, of course, a lot different. They just know what they're growing up in and it ain't good. It's not good. And there's a tension involved with their youth that's not fair. It's not fair.
Yeah.
It's traumatizing, like you said. And some of them are serving overseas. We're not exactly in the same flashpoints right now, but we've certainly had a group of young people who have spilled way too much blood and treasure in parts of the world, and you're in that whole question of why are we in these places. I don't know that any generation was ever more adversely affected, honestly, when you think about it, than the Vietnam, that generation. I used to work out on an army base with those veterans. I love those guys, but man, they had bad stories. They had bad stuff. Bad. It was bad. And I think what's so bad about it, they're in this part of the world and they don't really know why the hell, what's the objective. You know what I mean? So you go through all that. They weren't the heroes of World War II, and Korea was a draw, and now they're losing a war they don't have any control over. Yeah. I just can't imagine what that did to a generation of guys that went through that. All right, what would you like to say on the way out?
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you as well. This is More to Consider, and you're in charge of the outgo. You say all the different things we're supposed to say.
Please like, share, and subscribe, and comments.
And comment. We're going to do a show on comments at some point. We're going to try to figure out why the hell you say the things you say. All right. Love you, dear. See you soon.
Love you too.
We'll bring Charles in soon. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Happy
Bye.
New Year.
Thanks for tuning in. If you like the show, subscribe and hit your notification button to get an update when we post another episode. See you soon.